And welcome back to Fresh Outlook, everybody. I'm TWB. This week marked the 10th anniversary of the U.S.-led invasion into Iraq. Let's take a look.
In the Battle of Iraq, the United States and our allies have prevailed.
May 1st, 2003, only weeks after the U.S. invasion of Iraq, victory, it seems, is already within reach. But the brutal war is far from over and lasts another 8 years after George Bush's infamous speech.
And Iraq is free.
John Nagel was an officer in the U.S. Army at the time and deployed to Iraq. He says the cost of the war will be felt for decades.
In addition to the immediate cost, the thousands of American soldiers dead and wounded, come the long-term costs of taking care of them and taking care of their families for literally generations to come.
Too focused on Iraq, Washington put other matters on the side, from the war in Afghanistan to the military boom in China. The U.S. finally withdrew completely in 2011, a move some question today. The Iraq War cost a total of 120,000 lives, Iraqis and foreigners combined. It's a country left shaken, with the future still uncertain today.
And we have two more panelists joining us now, some new panelists, new faces. Let's meet them, shall we? First off, tell us your name and where you're from.
I'm Michael McCoy. I'm a professor at Rutgers University, where I focus on international relations, teach courses on American foreign policy and international strategy.
Terrific, that will suffice. And Rachel, tell us who you are, where you're from.
My name is Rachel Lopez. I'm a professor at Seton Hall Law School, but I'm also a cooperating attorney with the Center for Constitutional Rights.
Great, looking forward to your insights. So let's get into it, panel. Majority of Americans say the Iraq invasion was a mistake. Downright, outright, a mistake. How do we feel? Who wants to take it? Rachel, let's start with you.
Certainly, it's it was an illegal war based on egregious misrepresentations. We went in there promoting democracy and human rights. The situation there for democracy and human rights is in fact worse now than when we started.
How do you figure?
How do I figure? Well, if you look at civilian casualties, for one, there's documented there's been approximately, by U.S. estimates, only going to the 6 years into the war, 122,000 civilian deaths. And that doesn't count the excess deaths, which are measured in terms of malnutrition, birth defects, cancer rates.
Right.
If you measure those, it's 600,000 deaths that would not have occurred but for the war in Iraq.
And also doesn't include the numbers wounded.
Exactly.
That's totally separate. Michael, what do you think?
Well, again, I was agreeing with Rachel. The psychological damage of both the veterans that have gone there, the Iraqis themselves. I think that there are so many parts of this war that you can call a mistake. I mean, the decision to go to war based on we'll call it insufficient intelligence.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
But mixed with that, one thing that doesn't get highlighted enough is there's still a lot of mysteries involving the war. Like one, why did Saddam Hussein not just go on television and say, I will open up the whole country and let you look everywhere? Instead, he actually sort of obfuscated for too long, which kind of gave momentum to the war. And then we had war plans developed during the Clinton administration over a better administration of Iraq, which would have required 400,000 troops instead of the about 150,000 that were sent. Had we had 400,000 there, we probably would have been able to secure the country a lot better, secure the border so there would not have been a flood of foreign jihadis.
So you think, because we went in, but we should have had more people go in?
I think that, again, first the decision to go in, it shouldn't have happened.
Right, but I'm saying, but since we did go in,
but since we did go in,
we didn't put
so
enough
yeah,
in.
we can put this in phases. The decision to go in, but then even after you went in, the terrible decisions made there. I mean, all these statistics that Rachel's referring to, much of this could have been avoided had the surge of 2007 been the invasion of 2003.
Let's hear from Dee Dee.
Well, I think President Bush is one of our best presidents, and I think that was a good decision.
You also worked in his White House.
Yes, full disclosure. I was
Continue.
on the Bush campaign as well in the Bush White House. So yes, and I was there during 9/11, and when all this happened, what happened in New York, and what we had a lot of Americans lose their lives, and I believe that was a big part of this because we saw what folks like the bad guys, Hussein, and others that want to do ill will against our country. So I think that the war was a good war, if you can call it that, because you always have casualties, you always have bad things that happen. That's the nature of war. But remember, Homeland Security was put together. I mean, we really had a problem in the U.S. because we were attacked.
We had to blame someone. Rachel,
Well,
what are your responses to
partially to blame, of course.
I mean, especially, it's just an unwinnable argument. Saddam Hussein had no connection with Al-Qaeda. He was a secular
Sorry,
government.
but you know what, that's good for you to believe that, but I don't believe that, and a lot of Americans don't believe that either, because he wanted harm to come to us. He was harming his own people. I don't know why you would think it was bad that he's gone. It is a good thing. It was a good thing for the world that he was killed and gone, and that the country, you know, and the government was taken down. That was a good thing. That was a victory for our country and for the world.
Rachel?
Well, see, I'm
One
sorry.
second, I just wanted Rachel
Oh, yeah,
to
please,
respond
go
to
ahead.
that because she thinks that he was connected to Al-Qaeda, but you said
I mean, there's no
some say
evidence of that. Even Republicans say there's been no evidence.
Well,
of
you
that.
don't know that, and you know what? There was a lot of, murders, and there were a lot of problems with Saddam Hussein. So sorry, you know, I just think that I agree with you that it's bad that there were a lot of people were killed and a lot of bad things happened, but that is what is part of war. And and I really get upset when Americans go against what our president did and went against something that was good for our country.
But that's
and
actually
good
one of the
for
best things
world.
about the country we live in. We're supposed to go, if we feel, if we're not in agreement with our elected officials, we should voice our opinion and say we're against it. Michael, what do you
Well, I
think?
think that's why I make the distinction on sort of the multiple levels that we can look at this. Because even if we agree that, as you said, it was a good war, I think we can all be in agreement.
As wars can be.
Well, we can all be in agreement Saddam Hussein was a genocidal dictator.
Yes.
And I don't think anyone is celebrating, we wish we could go back to the days of Saddam. But that's why we almost want to step back and say, but if we're going to do something, as you say, wars are always terrible. So if you're going to make a decision to do it, you want to say, how can we limit the casualties as much? How can we provide as much? And when you see that we had plans in place that could have done that, and then people in the Pentagon, particularly Donald Rumsfeld, put these aside for a plans that led to horrible conditions, you step back and ask, why was that the case when we know war is so terrible, when we know we want to protect American lives and Iraqi lives that have suffered so much under this dictator? And I think that's really where the biggest disgrace, particularly pointing at the statistics that Rachel points out, really is of this war. It isn't because President Bush was a terrible man or that he, desired bad things to happen to Iraqis. It's that if you have these good intentions, follow through with good planning.
And by the way, it's estimated that this war cost us, I want to make sure, it cost American taxpayers $4 trillion. So
That's
why,
both Iraq and Afghanistan
right,
together.
why isn't this mentioned in the debate, when we're in the presidential debates, why isn't this more at the forefront, this statistic? Rachel?
I'm baffled by it as well. I can't explain it. I don't know if anyone else has a better explanation.
It's sad to say, but the answer is that Americans don't particularly care that much. That is to say, it doesn't, when you look at the 2012 election, it didn't move poll numbers one way or the other what position you took. Governor Romney said that we should, first he was like, okay, suggested we should withdraw from Afghanistan, then he was saying we weren't listening to the military. It didn't move his numbers one way or the other. So I think the question we really want to ask is not so much why aren't politicians talking about it, but why don't the American people care about
Yeah,
it? And then with Rachel, I don't know.
Why isn't anyone talking about it? Well, that's why we're talking about it. Dee Dee, what do you think about that?
Well, I
$4
think
trillion,
because
is it
Americans
worth
are
it?
proud. We're a strong, safe country, and a lot of that was because of President Bush. And what's
We're
happened?
a strong, safe country, and a lot of that is because of President
Yes,
Bush.
of course.
Interesting.
Of course.
Okay.
Well, Homeland Security, that happened right after 9/11. And I do put Saddam Hussein in the same category as all the bad guys who want to wish harm on us, on their people, on the world. I mean that's part of what our country's always done since World War I, World War II, and this war. That's what our country does. And I think we should be proud of that instead of putting it down. And I think we also realize of all the millions and billions of dollars that we give to other countries to help them rebuild
Didi's
and
characterizing
improve.
the war. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but you
Don't be sorry. That's what we should do. Go ahead.
But these wars were characterized as freedom operations, right? They were supposed to instill democracy and human rights. But when you look at the facts, we used chemical weapons against the
It
populations
happens. It
of
happened in
Iraq.
Vietnam. It happens in war.
And
That's
it's-
part of it.
But your justification, you said it a moment ago. You justified overthrowing Saddam because he used chemical weapons against his own people. So we went in there and used chemical weapons against them, and therefore we're justified for going to war. There's just a logical disconnect there.
Well, so I want to ask, so in what instances, because we were talking about this in the green room, so in what instances do we have evidence that the United States actually used chemical weapons as opposed to chemical weapons being dispersed in the
Well, if you look at,
environment?
we'll discuss that when we come back, but in
okay.
terms of cancer rates and the general health of the Iraqi people, some say obviously a lot of the nuclear policies are to blame. So we'll get to that when we come back to Fresh Outlook. We'll have the conversation continue about Iraq and how they stand today, and is the Middle East any safer, so to speak. Stay with us. You're watching Fresh Outlook.